I have one NaNoWriMo. That's right. I made it to 50,000 words, despite glaring setbacks and my own loss of faith in myself sometime midway through last week. See, when I last made the video, you might remember I was kind of down. I was a little harried. I was not in the best frame of mind. And I was 8,000 words behind or so. I think I was actually 6,000 words behind, but that total, while I caught up a bit, I soon was 8,000 words behind or more. I made almost all of that up in a single day this last Tuesday. I managed to pull my shit together, and I had nothing, no work that day, nothing else to do, so I sat down and I made myself write, and I got out that 8,000 words, and over the next few days I managed to pump out even more until sometime last night I crossed the 50,000 word mark. And when I did, I threw myself a little party. By which I mean I ordered pizza and just kind of went woohoo a lot. I'll throw a better party later. But for now, that's all I really needed. It was just a personal challenge. There's no real recognition that goes along with this, except, of course, the recognition of having done it. I've done it. I have beaten the challenge of 50,000 words in a month, and I feel really proud of myself for being able to do that. It was hard. There wasn't a lot of time, and just making myself write was hard. Through the writer's block in the second week, through the falling more and more behind in the late second and third, and the last week I was really started off really behind. So, and also I was just really busy. Ended up doing so much stuff that I had so little time, and I suppose that's always the way it is. Once you've got something you really want to do, but you really need the time to do it in, then it ends up that you don't have that time. So many other things intrude. And I find that the most important thing in writing for a writer to have is time. You need to have the time to sit down and really get into it. Really get into the flow of it. The only time you can produce good writing is when you are in the zone, when you're in the flow of good writing. If you can do that. If you're really good at it and you habituate yourself, that is, write every day. That's what they always recommend. If you ask anyone who knows about writing about advice on how to become a better writer, is write every day. Even if it's just for an hour, even if it's something stupid, even if it's something little, just write every day. Get something down on paper or in your word processor, but get something down. And it's really good advice. It builds up a kind of habit of switching your thoughts from normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill, I gotta do this, work, social life, whatever, into the writing mode, into the creative mode. And the hardest part for a writer like myself is getting into that creative mode, getting into that space, that headspace, where you can pull out the really good ideas and put them down. Becoming a really good writer requires that you do this basically on demand. You got to be able to turn on the creative portions of your brain whenever you need to. Because you don't always have the time to sit there and meditate on it until you're in the right place. I think I mentioned something about this before in these little vlogs about how if you're in the right headspace, it all flows freely. Well, that's true. If you're in the right headspace, it all flows freely, and you can put yourself in that right headspace, but you can't do it if you haven't been doing it. If you don't force yourself to write constantly, every day, even if it's only for an hour, even if it's only a little, if you don't force yourself to do that, you end up not being able to do it when you do have the time, when there is nothing facing you, when there's no other things looming in your life, you find yourself unable to push yourself into that space. Unless you've got a really good idea burning in the hindquarters of your brain, in which case you're already in that space. So there's no need to put you in it. It's the good writers, the ones who can produce really good work, and a lot of it are the prolific ones, are the ones who can do that, who can switch their minds from normal everyday into creative writing mode. And I think that's true for all really good artists of any type. A really good painter has to paint, or every day, or draw, or whatever, every day, or as much as possible to be able to really get into the feeling of it and be able to put their mind in the place where they're creative. I would imagine the same thing is true for songwriters. I would imagine the same thing is true for anyone who does anything creative. The more you do it, the better you are at doing it. It's not to say that if you write constantly you'll be absolutely brilliant eventually. You won't. There are hard limits on what you can do, and if you start with not terribly good material, and by that I mean the ideas, you'll end up with not terribly good material. And another thing every great writer needs is a great editor. Someone who will sit down, go through what you put on paper, and some of it you will feel is brilliant and some of it you'll feel is bad, and they're the ones who can tell you what is really good, what is really working, and what really isn't. The sign of a really great writer is the fact that his or her work is well edited, well put together. Now, good editing is hard to find. Just using your friends and family for it, unless they are really good editors, and really good editors are rare, you're not likely to have one in your close circle of friends and family. So unless you really do, they're not going to be good editors. Oh, they'll be okay for like a good go-through. And if they're feeling brutal enough, and if they don't mind hurting your feelings enough, they can even provide very good insight by showing you, where you've gone completely off the rails and started to write utter tripe. But for the most part, either they don't know what to look for, or they don't want to hurt your feelings. Now, if they don't want to hurt your feelings, you can cajole and poke at them until they finally snap and tell you what they really think of what you've written, but that's not always the best option to go with, because you don't want to hurt their feelings. And most likely they just don't know what they're looking for. They can pick out spelling errors for you, and they can pick out major plot holes, but they're not going to get down into why a scene works or why it doesn't. They're not going to be able to point out where you should tighten up your prose or where you need more description. They can give you vague hints, generalities, but unless they really know what they're doing, and most of them, because they don't do it enough, they don't.